All right. We're here, episode 5 of the Rugged Athlete podcast. We're changing gears today. We're doing a Q&A episode, which I'm excited for because we got some good questions coming in, very specific questions. I'm excited to give some very specific and detailed answers on this one. If you're curious where we got these questions, I sent out a post or question, a poll, I guess. I don't even know what it's called, on my Instagram story, and people dropped these questions in there. Now we're hoping to do more like this in the future. So if you have a question that you really want to ask, just look out for the Instagram stories and be sure to throw it in there when we do another one. But let's jump right in. Let's start knocking out these questions. The first one. This one is actually a special question for you, Justin. It's what hair products do you use for those curls? And this is from Ethan Fowler. He really wants to know.
Dude, that's my buddy Ethan from my hometown. That's hilarious.
Yeah, you didn't know I was throwing that question out, did you?
No, I didn't. Saltwater
But
therapy,
I
man.
think everyone wants to know. It's not just Ethan.
Just saltwater therapy. Just get in the ocean, let it dry. The curls will be there in 2 to 4 hours. Call it a day. And then the only problem is really just the knots. Can't spend too much time in the ocean with the long hair and not expect to get some Rastafarian vibes going your way.
Well, that's actually a good answer. I was expecting you to not even pay attention to that, knowing it was Ethan.
Dude, that's crazy. That guy is hilarious.
Yeah, it was pretty funny when he sent that out. He was like, "Yeah, make sure you ask him first."
Coming from the Dallas Fire Department, really intriguing question.
All right, we'll get into the first actual training question here. Well, this isn't even really a training question. This is more general, but it's going into my first fire season. Any advice? I've got some things that I think would be good for kind of like a rookie going into their first year, but let's have you answer this one first, Justin. What do you have for a rookie going into their first year?
First piece of advice, because I have several on here, is to adopt the mindset that you're no longer just a human on this planet, you're an athlete. Whether you've been an athlete before in a sport setting, and then you took a hiatus and now you're here, or you jumped right from it, you can't make any mistake about it. You got to treat your body like an athlete and you're going into your season. So when you look at folks in the professional athlete space and how just meticulous they are with their regimening, I know we don't make $1 million. I know we aren't sponsored. I know it's not our full-time job just to prep meals and recover. Like, we're doing manual labor. It's blue collar as shit. But when you can, make those adjustments to set yourself up like an athlete with your fueling, with your sleep, with everything just overall throughout your day. Have that mindset that you are a machine that's meant to do work. And if you don't upkeep that machine, stuff's going to go way awry across the course of a season that's full of damage. You have to prioritize recovery.
Yep, I know. I remember my first fire, like my first assignment, and it was local. So we drove there, we dug line all day, and then we drove back. And I remember, I mean, I was dead too. I mean, I was completely exhausted. And I just remember in the buggy looking at all the other rookies, and they looked way worse than me. And I was like, I know I'm hurting. I can't imagine how much these other guys are hurting, because a lot of them had never done anything hard or physical like this before. And thankfully I had my athlete background to help me out. And yeah, it's like, man, recovery is a priority. And that first fire really opened my eyes to that. I've got some things that I want to share for this, and they're not even necessarily like in my wheelhouse of strength and conditioning. But the first thing that I want to say is what I think is the most important is have a sense of urgency. Don't ever be the last one with your gear ready to go, lined up. Don't ever be the last one off the buggy. Don't ever be the last one in the buggy. Always try to be first in everything. That I'm talking about things that take no skill, no knowledge. Like, you don't need to know all the stuff about fire behavior to just make sure that you're ready before everyone else is ready. Having a sense of urgency at all times is going to set you up for success. It's going to put you ahead of other rookies. And just from that standpoint, but also, you're going to mess up. You're going to not know stuff, and you're going to forget to grab a tool or something out of the truck that you were supposed to grab. And if you're already standing there ready, that buys you extra time for when you do make a mistake and you do forget something to go fix it before, like, you're already in the shit and you're already behind. We've all seen it before, like that individual who's just struggling, like their shit's yard sailed all over the place, and they're trying to find something in their pack, and like everyone's waiting on the one, and then they finally get ready and realize like, oh, I actually still have to do this, or I forgot to grab this. And then it's like, it's just a nightmare, and you can tell they're stressed, and it's everyone's waiting. It's just not a good situation. So go into fire season always trying to be first, have that sense of urgency. Number 2 is similar, but a little bit different. It's always be productive. Always look for something that you could be doing, whether that's refilling the cooler, whether it's finding something to clean. There's always something you can be sweeping, or always something you can be tidying up around where you're working. And little things like that really help set the tone and just show your leadership that you're someone that can be trusted to be productive and to do the work that needs to get done. There's always work. You just got to go look for it sometimes.
I have something to add on that, because I think that's
Mhm.
100% true. Like, if you're being productive, it almost takes the guesswork out of your job. If you have that mindset, which I would adopt through at least your rookie season, if not to some degree throughout all seasons, if you're questioning whether you should do something, or whether you should participate, or whether you should help out, you should probably just be doing it. So in the case of your rookie class, there's a lot of stuff you're not going to want to do. There's a lot of stuff at 4 or 5 a.m. you're going to have to get up and not want to do. If you have to get up and every single day feel that friction of, do I need to do this? Do I need to give that effort? Now you have to constantly overcome that stress response every single aspect of your day, versus adopting that shift in mindset to, man, I have to do this. It's going to be shitty. It's never going to change throughout this whole year. I might as well have fun with it. So like in the example of waking up and cleaning the windows, even when they don't need to be cleaned, doing stuff as a rookie, sometimes it's not always necessary, and you can fight that battle in your head of, this is bullshit. This doesn't need to be done. Why am I doing this? Or you could put on some music, hang out with your rookie friends, and just have a good time with it. Because that's truly the way that I feel like I made all the rookie shit fun my first season, was just having a class that no matter what was thrown at us, it was just kind of like, screw it, let's get it done as quick as possible. Let's hammer this out. Oh, we need like 40 cases of waters in the trucks. Let's make it a workout. Let's put on like some music and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Finding
Who can
ways to
carry the most
enjoy.
waters?
Yeah, man, like there's always stuff that is just going to fall on you. But if you can find a way to just make it, and it just is what it is. Like that's a lesson for life, because there's always going to be shit you don't want to do. So the more you can adopt the mentality and just make the most of it, don't treat it like it's something you have to do. It's something you get to do. Just because you stop at a gas station doesn't mean you have to spend money at the gas station. It's not a requirement to put your credit card somewhere every time you get off the buggy. And we literally calculated it on one individual on my crew over the course of like the entire season. I think it was somewhere around $4,200 at the gas station. That's like a badass trip. Your off season's covered. If you just, I'm not saying don't spend money at gas stations. There's a lot of use and sometimes necessity to getting food and energy supplies and hydration supplies. Like, do your thing, but maybe don't go and spend $50 on chips and candy when you don't need to, just because it's like, man, my dopamine's kind of low. I'm on a long car ride. I want something to pick me up. Maybe we find better tools and more effective strategies that don't cost you $50 to regulate that response.
That's a good one. That one's underrated, and people don't.
It is. We
People
don't make $1 million. Why are you spending $4,000 at the gas station over a season?
Yeah. Yeah, you see them like coming out the door. It's like falling out their arms because they have
It's
so
like
many.
groceries, man. You went to like
Yeah,
Vaughn's for the week at the gas station.
yeah. The one that I was going to share is I want to make sure I word this right. It's finding a balance between like just putting your head down and working, and keeping your head up and having awareness of what's going on. Because especially as a rookie, like, depending on where you get kind of thrown in and what your role on the crew is, for the most part, your job is just to dig or just do whatever work that needs to get done. And sometimes like the best thing you need to do is just keep your head down. Keep your head down and just do your job. But I do want to say, I think there needs to be some level of balance to where you're seeing what's going on around you. You might not, you're not going to understand a lot of the big picture and a lot of the stuff that your overhead is going and taking care of and doing. And you don't, at this point in your career, you don't need to know that stuff, but it does help to ask questions and just try to pick the brain of overhead. And even if it's really nothing that you should even really be concerned with, be careful because like you can annoy your squad leader or captain or whoever real quick by asking dumb questions. But if you're genuinely curious and you're like, I'm trying to learn so I can be a student of fire and just grow in my knowledge and eventually use this information, it can be super helpful and just give you a better picture of kind of where you fit in with your digging in kind of the grand scheme of things. So I think, you kind of have to play that by ear, and a lot of it's situational. But then I've kind of got a fourth one, 3.5 or 4, and it is always be observing. So the reason I say this is because it's really easy in this job to just get so exhausted and so tired that like you're not thinking about anything. Your mind is just blank. And that's where mistakes happen. That's where you forget things. And that's where you don't know what's going on around you necessarily. But what I mean by this is, when you're observing other people, especially other rookies, you can see what other people are doing good and what they're doing productive, and you can learn from them and then take what they do and apply it to what you do. I mean, you can learn from other people's mistakes. If someone else is getting corrected on something, watch, learn, make sure that you pick up on that so that you don't make that same mistake. And then you don't have to deal with that whole, now I'm getting yelled at, now I'm getting told what not to do because you learned from other people. And the only way you can do that is if you're constantly scanning and observing and seeing what people are doing good, wrong, bad. Take the good stuff, learn from the bad stuff, learn from other people's mistakes. And that's going to help you really accelerate, especially as a rookie. And you're learning so much so fast. So
I have one thing
that
that
was
kind
all
of
I got
goes,
for that first question. That's my advice.
that kind of sparked one that I didn't even think about yet. But I also want the caveat out here that my fire experience is limited, but I've done enough things in my life that I sucked at and became good at to, I think, really ingrain this one principle that I think translates across every field I've ever entered into. And that's just not to be afraid of failure. And as a rookie, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to fail. It might
Yep.
happen daily. And that process is something that, as a teacher, as a person who went through a high level degree, as a person who then entered a field that my first fire, I bullshitted 2 online courses and found myself on a night operation constructing direct line. I fail a ton of times in life. My whole entire life has been a mix of entering into a space that I knew nothing about, failing a shit ton of times. And that process overall doesn't scare me anymore because I've grown a relationship with that failure just to see it as its opportunities to grow. That's the main thing I would adopt throughout this entire year if it's your first season in fire overall too, is just acknowledging that that failure process it's not a negative. And you viewing it with that anxiety, with stress, with trying to prevent it is working against you. If you go into that relationship with an open mind and can slow is smooth, smooth is fast, understand that that process will take a little bit of time, you're going to enjoy your life way more than thinking, oh, I'm not the best. This isn't where I want to be. Sure, it's not, but you're on a path. So don't treat it for more than it is. You're going to fail until you're not. And that process happens for everybody.
Yeah. That's a good way to sum up that whole first question is you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
But it's not a
It's
bad thing. You can
inevitable.
learn from it. Let's move on to number 2. Number 2 is, do you have any tips for nutrition at camp and on the line? Yeah. And I will say we could probably keep this answer for this one a little bit shorter because we'll have our nutrition coaches JJ and Heidi on for future episodes, and this is their world. But I've got 2. I just want to hit on 2 kind of quick tips. And one is around protein. Protein is just so hard to consistently get enough of when you're on an assignment. And so if you are going to store stops or going to gas stations, that is what I would prioritize. Grab some protein shakes that you can throw in the cooler and then drink at the end of the shift. Grab some extra jerky. I know by the end of fire season, you're sick of jerky, but it really is such a good way to get more protein in. Plus, there's obviously a ton of sodium, so you're getting some electrolytes as well. Prioritize protein first and foremost. Really make sure you're getting a lot of it or as much as you can. That's just maybe not provided in the sack lunches. Because as you know, those sack lunches are really carb heavy, a lot of processed food as well. And then the only protein is deli meat for the most part. And if you get a bad batch, like we just have no protein all day. Like, cause I've had some sandwiches and I'm like, I'm not touching this thing. This is gross. And then now I just went 12, 13 hours without really any protein. So that's the first thing I would say is prioritize protein. And the second thing I would say, this is more for on the line, is grab some emergency carbs. I love to talk about emergency carbs. And this is for when you're doing your high intensity stuff. Like if you're going direct for a long time, if you're on a saw team, you're going to be burning through the carbohydrates that you have stored up because you're going to be working in zone 3, zone 4 heart rate for sometimes pretty extended periods of time. Having some quick carbs in your pack, like in the brain of your mystery ranch, is going to be a great move because when you need them, I'm talking like it's an emergency, you need carbs, you want that stuff ready to go. So there's a few different ways you can go about this. I've literally used like running gels or like running chews, those energy chews. Those are obviously great because they're made for endurance athletes doing endurance stuff. So that fits perfect. The problem is those are expensive and those add up because you can be running through those multiple per shift easily. Here's what I do that's a little bit more cost effective. I either just go with straight up candy. Sour Patch Kids was my go-to, or even better, I would go to Costco and grab like a big 40 pack of fruit snacks and then keep that in the buggy. And then I would always make sure I have like 4 or 5 in my brain at all times. And can't tell you how many times that saved my life. Not literally, but just threw in like 3 packs of fruit snacks in my mouth. Boom, just got like 60 grams of carbs. I don't know how many carbs are in that. That's probably too much, but you get the point. Need quick carbs, need those sugars, need the glucose. Boom, got it. Keep working. So those are my 2 tips on nutrition. Like I said, JJ and Heidi can go over more, but I know you got some too. What do you got for this one?
Yeah, you hit a good amount on like the performance side of things. So I'll take what I can left and go with more of like the holistic longevity, body composition across the season approach. I see a lot of people eat out of boredom. And why do you think that is? Because all the food we're eating is garbage. It's processed. It's not satiating. There's no fiber. It's not filling. It's low protein. So finding ways to make your life easier by having bang for your buck nutrients is going to at least mitigate that partially. I know psychologically, if you're out there for 12 hours and you're just sitting, that's hard not to just eat. But if that's something that's heavily concerning for you, have more of an eye on the food product labels. Make sure you're trying to prioritize fiber. If you don't have it, like Austin said, Costco was my bread and butter. I went and I was looking for fiber. I was looking for whole grains. I was looking for protein. All of those things are going to make me feel more full gram per gram in comparison to the stuff that you're going to get in your lunch. So that's just like to start off with. Eat more food that's going to make you full. Prioritize whole foods when you can. But at the same time, just be more aware. I just see people mindlessly eating sometimes. I'm looking at those labels, not to where I want to calculate it, but I just want to have an idea of what's going in my body. If you're at the camp line for food in the morning and I see you grab 2 of those 450 calorie brownies and we're just staging and you're concerned about your body comp, why? Why are you having 40 to 50 grams of fat when you don't need to? Just look at the big, like broad strokes of what's going into your body that day and shift away from ones that are just, oh, this food looks like great to me. I'm getting that like initial response of just being super psyched on this brownie to one that's a little bit more strategic. What fuel do I need for my day? What is my task going to look like? But on the same hand, you never know what you're going to get into. You could randomly get a spot fire and now you're at work for 24 hours. So there's always like a push pull of these systems, finding that balance between finding a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to go too deep into the calories, but I want to make sure I'm prepared in the event that something happens. So that answer is not straightforward. But if you have a good idea of what that assignment's been like and you can afford to maybe not go so deep into those high caloric processed foods and snacks, it's going to be a major game changer for you in the long run across 6 months of doing it.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up 2 things. Fiber, because again, with all the processed food and everything that you're getting, usually when you're on assignment, you're massively underfueled when it comes to fiber and micronutrients. I mean, just just the whole fire season extrapolated out. Like just think about how many less like normal meals you're getting than you normally would. And all of those other things are where your micronutrients are, your vitamins, your minerals, your fiber. Like by the time September rolls around, October rolls around, that stuff is you've just been depleted of it for so long. So any chance you can to just get some vegetables, get some fruit, get some anything that's going to get those fiber numbers up that's not processed is, you have to jump on those opportunities just because they're so few during fire season. So let's move on. That was a good one. I think those are just some quick hitting tips for people nutrition wise. I like this next question. It is, can you advise on uphill training if there are no hills in your area? I want to start with this one because I do get this question quite a bit. We've got some people that have gone through our one-on-one coaching program who live, on the East Coast or live like up north or live in Iowa. We got someone in Iowa, we got someone in Minnesota, we got someone in Illinois. So we deal with this a lot. And there's a couple ways that I program for this specifically. And they're really simple. They're not complicated. They're not some fancy methodology. The first one is literally just increasing max strength, just increasing your ceiling when it comes to your strength output. Taking your max rep front squat from like a 185 to a 245, for example. That's going to make massive improvements to your uphill hiking just because of your capacity with your lower body strength. I think people really underestimate how much strength plays a role in hiking performance, and especially the steeper and steeper that you get, because the more and more stress goes into all the muscles of your lower half when you're hiking up steep stuff and hiking down steep stuff. So that's my first thing is let's just get really freaking strong. That's going to make your life way easier, I promise you. And then the second thing that I do, I talk about this a lot when I talk about work capacity development in general, and it's this concept of building fatigue resistance, specifically with local fatigue. So local fatigue is, there's two types of fatigue, global and local. We talked about this in the hiking episode. Global is just cumulative, like full body fatigue. Local is very specific and targeted to a part of the body, a muscle group, and this is important for this question because hiking is obviously very specific. It targets your quads, your calves, your glutes, your upper back, your trunk. All these muscles are essentially working constantly, and they don't have a break. There's no rest. It's just like repetition after repetition. So we can program work capacity sessions to help build resistance here, fatigue resistance here. A lot of things like, just high volume lunges. One of my favorite workouts of all time is 400 lunges for time. My benchmark is under 12 minutes. Most people, it takes them 12 to 15, maybe 16 minutes to do that one. But I like it because it's literally just 12 to 15 minutes of repetition, same muscle groups. And, it's body weight, it's low load, low intensity. So it's safer that way. But then we can just get a ton of volume, and we can build that fatigue resistance there. And then there's a bunch of other ways I designed. That one's like pretty simple and straightforward. It's just friggin' lunges forever. I also like to call it lunge fest. That's my party word for it. And there's other ways I program too, but the concept is the same. We're stressing certain muscles through our exercise selection and prescribing volume, prescribing intensity with the idea that we're trying to build that fatigue resistance. You can do that without having hills, and it's actually really easy. Like I said, we don't overcomplicate it, but it's just about strength at the end of the day. Strength, and then that strength endurance hitting those specific muscles. So I could keep going on that, but I think I covered the main points I wanted to cover. So I want to kick it to you and see what you got for this one.
I say almost everything the exact same, but in a different way. When I'm looking at programming hiking performance, I think of three categories or three bins that I can try my best to mimic the demands best as possible. First bin is biomechanical. I'm looking at the joint angles, the muscle groups involved, the force development, the capacity that I need to have to put a heavy weight on my back and move uphill, locomote on steep terrain. I can do step-ups, I can do lunges, I can do heavy back squats, I can load my spinal column and do upward-based motions and get into knee extension, hip extension, ankle extension. I don't necessarily need to think too broad, like too deep into the weeds with respect to just abiding by those principles will
Mhm.
translate to a large degree. And another advantage of that is when you're hiking throughout the season, it's not always on flat terrain. Maybe you're side sloping, and maybe we start to form imbalances or get altered mechanics. So that's one advantage of not hiking and trying to improve hiking performance. Because in the gym, now I can train my knee, my toes, my hips to all track. I can train that neuromuscular efficiency and stave off, maybe even make myself more resilient to injury and try to recruit in the proper ways and make sure I'm doing things with the proper mechanics and movement pattern because I'm in isolation in a gym without those ecological variables like side sloping. So getting into certain things like max strength training or putting a pack on and then doing those exercises, large level of transferability. Next aspect is going to be physiological. Most of the time, our hiking fatigue sets in because of cardiovascular strain rather than muscular strain for not necessarily everybody, but I imagine that for a large percent of folks, you're falling out on hikes because the heart rate's super high, breath rate's super high. We're tapping into anaerobic metabolism, not really meant to go for a long time. And in the case of wildland firefighting, where you have an initial hike that's maybe 30, 40 minutes to an hour, maybe it's 2 hours, throughout each day, you're continually like micro hiking. These are long duration bouts. And if your ceiling, let's say your heart rate's at 70%, it's very plausible to assume you're going to get up there on your hikes and be there throughout the shift. If you're ceiling for getting into those like high intensity pathways, those really inefficient but high output pathways for producing energy, you're going to have nothing in the tank. You're going to start feeling that fatigue. RP is going to go up, core temp's going up, ventilation rate's going up. That's like your body's kind of like, that gas tank's going towards E. You don't have much left in you. So again, that same theme of raising your ceiling, training at high intensities, increasing the anaerobic thresholds, making sure we're staying in those aerobic zones at high intensities is the name of the game. That's going to translate to a wide degree no matter what you're doing, whether it's mountain biking or trail running or doing metabolic resistance training, circuit training with your lifting, training your body to respond to those high intensities and accommodate them so that you can then utilize those more efficient pathways. That has heavy transferability to all aspects of performance, especially with respect to endurance. So I just train those concepts. I'm trying to raise the ceiling for each of those. So as we have said earlier, and even in this episode, the workloads here, we want to extend the gap between your ceiling and what's required of you. Because the closer those get together, the less time you have to produce that work. You can't sustain that for long. And the last piece, even if you're on the East Coast, even if you have no hills, start to include those ecological variables. Get on sand, get on dirt, get on a railroad track. Start to find those different things that can maybe provoke that kind of altered side to side, uncomforting, like just uneven ground. Like those things should be introduced. You can't just go from a step climber to wildland firefighting and expect that to happen overnight. Start to train the ankles, knees, and hips to accommodate uneven loads. Start carrying something on your shoulder. Let your core start to see that and build it up over time rather than I'm going on the Stairmaster until it's day one and now I've got a saw on my shoulder. I'm going on slopes that are uneven, super steep. Get the ecological variables in there, rocks, dirt, whatever, sand. Have somebody just like mess with you, have somebody grab your pack as you're walking, mess with you. I don't know. Be
Yeah.
creative. The
Yeah,
more
for sure.
the more unstable you can get during that activity as you get closer to the season, the better you bridge the gap between gym setting and job setting.
Yeah. Yeah, I know people are probably like, "That sounds so silly, have someone grab and pull your pack." I'm telling you, I've done stuff like that with pro athletes so much. Like, it's called rhythmic stabilizations, and it's such a great way to target dynamic stabilization, to target a lot of those kind of those muscle fibers that aren't huge in force production, but they're huge in stability and biomechanical efficiency. But we do this stuff all the time with our especially our pitchers and to develop like shoulder strength and shoulder stability. So it sounds silly, but I'm telling you that stuff
It's not silly in the sports setting, man.
not silly and it's harder than you think.
You see some silly stuff in the sports setting that works. That's what it opens your
Yep.
eyes when you see a basketball player go up for a layup and their coach is smacking the shit out of them with a pad. Like it might have sounded silly decades ago, but there's all those nuanced things that mimic the demands of the job that happen during the job. You have to incorporate them.
Yep. We got two more questions here. Next one. Do you do female specific training slash research, and do you incorporate it into your plans? I know you've got some stuff for this one. I just want to say that kind of the only thing I have for this is hell yes, we do female specific training. I don't want to. I'm not going to get too deep into this one. I just want to say this. We train a lot of females, and actually more females than I anticipated, I guess, while as Rugged Athlete has grown. And they're all badass females. It's so cool seeing some of our females when they come in to when they leave the program, or just as they progress and get stronger, get fitter, and is really cool. We got some complete badass females in our program. So we do female specific stuff. I know you've got some really good notes on this one, so I'm just gonna kick it to you and have you share what you had written down.
I'm going to start with the caveat that every individual person has variability. So the points I'm about to speak on are general notes across wide ranges of the population and just things for you to keep in mind for context. If you're a female listening, I'm not saying this is you. I'm saying that these are things that might relate when looked at large sample sizes. So for example, when I have a female client, I'm not just going off of a direct thing that the research tells me I should be doing. I'm treating the person. Every person is unique. Every person has variability. Your nutrition needs, I can't just look at a WebM, I can't just look at a Google Scholar, what should females eat, and then go off that. I can't just look at, well, how should females train? Like anything that you see online like that doesn't work person to person. So don't take any of this to be like gospel. But there are certain things that females should be aware of with respect to physical training that do differ. But we could start with the heavy hitters as far as what's the same. Your physiology is not that far off in the grand scheme of things. When we talk about progressive overload, you're going to respond the same way a male does to progressive overload, continually, incrementally increasing those demands, getting that response, adapting, very much the same. Your absolute strength versus relative strength is one thing that might differ. Males generally are going to have greater absolute strength, much in part because we're larger. We have more mass. It's not a muscle to muscle difference. It's not a quality muscle difference. It's the fact that you're smaller on average. So that's where that statistic kind of lies. If you took a same fat-free mass female and fat-free mass male, I would not be able to make an argument that the male is going to have greater absolute strength than you. But relative to the body weight, that's where the difference kind of lies. There are some physiological differences in upper body strength that we do see though. So in the case of a wildland firefighter where you have load carriage, a lot of upper body muscular endurance, that's something that is going to be a heavy basis for what I'm training for you, because I know you have a predisposition to not have that be like your best attribute. Push-ups, pull-ups, muscular endurance on the upper body, heavy load carriage, also because you might not be the heaviest person. If I have a 60-pound pack on you and you're a 140-pound female, that's an extremely high load on your spinal column, your muscular systems, and cardiovascular systems. Those all three increase strain. So that's one caveat to male versus female specific. I'm hammering upper body training. I want to make sure that you're as resilient to that context because the job's not going to care that you're male or female. You're going to have to carry the same pack. You're going to have to do the same tasks. So that's one aspect of training that is a greater emphasis per se, is that upper body, max strength, capacity, endurance, load carriage capacity. Next aspect, we can go with injury rates. We look at the female pelvis versus the male pelvis and that relationship to the knee. It's called a Q angle. You guys typically on average, of course, individual variability, have a greater Q angle, so we have a greater stress placed on the ACL. Going from pelvis to knee, there's that vector kind of line drawing inward versus straight
It's
neutral.
less vertical.
It's
more
not as
angle.
vertical like in the males who have maybe a little bit more square of a pelvis. So keeping that in mind, when I'm doing my training, I want to hammer single leg strength. I want to hammer dynamic stability during locomotive tasks, during lunges, split squats. I want to do a ton of single leg work to beef up that complex around the knee so that we don't cave in. And if you're a female with super underactive glutes, you have a really poor ability to externally rotate the hip and get that knee back in a neutral position. That's a property, that's a pattern I want to train over and over and over in the gym so that it translates, so that your body now has that neuromuscular connection to that tracking, so that when you're out on the fire line, you have boots on, you're side sloping. Now at least you have a chance to be resilient, because your body naturally wants that knee to cave in. And over time, not real great for our cartilage, our joints, the integrity of that joint at the knee itself. So that's one example of a specific injury that is a higher risk for females that you would want to train for. Last one is hormonal. We look at females, whether it's society, whether it's physiology, we have a leanness emphasis for females throughout their entire lifespan, especially in regard to sport. So I imagine that a fair amount of you are very much wondering about, am I eating too much? How do I make sure that I'm getting the proper, I don't know, just body composition for this job? How do I make sure I'm like the most fit unit possible? And maybe you overthink that so much that it creates this process in your mind that you can't eat too much. You need to always be, I don't know, under fueling and worried about gaining weight. That's super problematic for endurance athletes. You have this phenomenon amongst the male and female community, but it kind of is a little bit more of a issue in regard to the female physiology. When you eat less than you consume, when you're expending these super high energy expenditures across your shift, across your workouts, and this is known as relative energy deficiency. You need enough calories to keep the lights on in your body, and that's basal metabolic rate. If I'm a female, that's something I'm heavily investing into that baseline knowledge of how much I should be eating each day. And that's typically just based off how much fat-free mass we have. So if I'm going in, getting a DEXA, getting an InBody, or simply just trying to get my fat-free mass, I would utilize one of these equations online that can give you a predictor of how many calories I need just for my body's systems to upkeep themselves. And then look at that in coordinates with how many calories I'm burning throughout my shift, throughout my workout. It doesn't need to be tracked exactly, but you know if you're under eating 500, 1,000, 2,000 calories over time, it's going to be extremely problematic in the grand scheme of things. And you don't necessarily need to have numbers. I would just look at the effects on you. If you have low energy, if you're seeing continual declines in your performance, your mood, your motivation, poor sleep, poor recovery, and then leading all the way to a loss of a menstrual cycle or menstrual cycle irregularities, those are the things I'd really pay attention to that give you feedback to maybe I'm under eating. Maybe I'm not giving my body enough just to keep the lights on right now. And I'm not a dietitian. I'm not somebody who works heavy in this area, but I feel like it's an important enough topic to give you that peace of mind to know you need to be eating enough. You need to be treating yourself like an endurance athlete who's expending enough calories to where you need to compensate. You can't just be eating the same amount as your girlfriend across the street who works a desk job. Completely different set of contexts going on between the two bodies. And don't drag yourself down with the leanness sport attitude if that's something that you've always kind of adopted or something you've been kind of having anxiety about your whole life. You need calories, you need carbs, you need those things to keep the lights on and supplement the work that you're doing, or those irregularities are bound to set in at some point.
Yeah. That was good stuff. A couple things came to mind while you were explaining those, and one was just on what you're saying about the under fueling. That is something that's been common a lot with our one-on-one female clients, especially the ones that are, going either on a hot shot crew, going into a hot shot crew. We trained a female going to join a rappel crew last off season, and that was a pretty common theme. We're training hard to get you ready for this job. And, in some cases, like we were doing 2-a-days with one of the females, we got to fuel a lot more. Like your energy's down, you're feeling depleted. And then we went through the nutrition. We're like, we need more calories. We need more fuel. This is a pretty simple fix here. And so I think that is important for everybody, but especially in that case. And then I like that you mentioned very specific examples with absolute versus relative strength and like with the actual differences in anatomy. One of the things that I've noticed a lot, and this is going back to my time, training high school female athletes, college female athletes. Typically, everyone's different, but you'll see for the most part more females having more laxity in their joints. They're just more hypermobile overall. And so, they might have like much higher degrees of hip internal rotation or shoulder internal external rotation. Their spines are more bendy, than your average male in a lot of cases. And so when it comes from a programming standpoint, a lot of times I won't necessarily give a lot of mobility drills or more end range of motion stuff. If I do, I'm making sure there's isometrics involved so that we're also increasing strength in those deep ranges of motion. But a lot of it's more stability based and just more strength overall. because if you're hypermobile, if you have that joint laxity, you don't need more range of motion. Like you already got it. Whereas like me, I'm like on the whole opposite end of the spectrum. Like my body just I need to really focus on mobility and moving more. So, kind of understanding that. And that's why we do some of our movement assessments to get a better idea of what that looks like. That goes into programming. Do we need to focus more on range of motion or more on stability and strength? Most females fall into that latter category, but it is individual to an extent. So that's why we do all of our assessments and everything.
I have one more I forgot about: high intensity exercise. Follicular phase versus luteal phase. It's a completely different context of what your body's trying to do, what it's evolutionarily like trying to make sure that it can do as far as like keeping the lights on right now. It's not necessarily working in accordance with what you want to do, is increasing aerobic capacity, increasing my max strength. The high intensity exercise across a month span is going to look very different at the beginning of the follicular phase and during the luteal phase. So that's one thing for females to keep in mind. If you're engaging in high intensity training and you're feeling like your performance is kind of getting capped, you feel like you can't push into that zone, you're feeling low motivation, low energy, everything you're doing is just perceived exertion way up, there might be a reason for that. That might have to do with where you're just at along your cycle. And that's not necessarily something I'm directly programming, because that's a lot of intuitive on your part. And it varies obviously person to person, could be subjective depending on the day. But that's one thing just for you to note. If you're engaging in frequent high intensity training across the month, I would plan to do that high intensity training in a period of time where it's not working against you, where you feel like you are in a spot where your body's ready for that. You can reach those thresholds, because in the beginning of the follicular phase, across large sample sizes, females tend to be able to exert themselves on those higher intensity levels to greater rates. You're in a
Yep.
physiological context to push those thresholds, versus during the mid-luteal phase, everything's working against you. Core temp is up. Maybe you feel bloated. Maybe the motivation is down. Those fluctuations between estrogen way up right during that end of the follicular and progesterone being up in the luteal have drastic consequences on everything psychological and physiological happening with high intensity exercise. So giving yourself that space to not be dragging yourself down if you're feeling like dog shit during your training, look contextually at what's happening inside your body and give yourself some grace, and also just be efficient. If you're in that zone, if you're in that phase where high intensity is not it, work on the base, work on that low threshold stuff. Give yourself the
Yeah.
opportunity to be more effective in those days instead of always working against what your body's naturally wanting to do right now. That's just the scope of training, because obviously when you're in the job, nothing fluctuates depending on those things, but it's context. It's something for us all to be aware of and acknowledge what somebody's going through during that phase of the month. That's just, if that was a male thing, we would be paying way more attention to it. It's just, there's such a disconnect between
Yeah.
the male mind and what that concept truly is. Imagine if you were bleeding for an entire week, feeling like dog shit, and then now trying to go train high intensity. Like, you have to have empathy. Like, you don't necessarily get to change the job, but to simply empathize with the fact that that person's body's undergoing some shit and give them some like grace if they're just not feeling it that day. That's like the least we could do.
Yeah. That's a great point. Something a lot of males in general, but especially male coaches and trainers
It's got philosophical
don't think about
right here,
enough.
but
I know
yeah,
I didn't
dude,
think about that
give the
early on in
females
my
some
career.
some grace, bro. Fucking get off their backs.
Yeah. All right, we got one more. Last question here. Do you program anything specifically for bone health, maintaining, gaining bone density? I'm going to keep my answer very short and simple on this one, and it's heavy strength training. So yes, the answer is yes, we do program, and we lift heavy weights. I will say on this, I've had a common response with some one-on-one clients who are, I would say, are some of our more fit clients to come through our program. And it's when we get to kind of like early to middle off season, and we're now starting to transition into like heavy triples, heavy doubles on some barbell lifts. I've had several people be like, "Can we do more reps, more volume?" And they're like, "It's too easy." I'm like, "Heavy doubles should not be too easy. You should be a little bit nervous and anxious going into that workout, because you're like, oh, dude, I got heavy doubles on deadlift today. This is gonna eat my lunch if you're doing it right." Because like we're talking 90+% of your one rep max. Those should be I mean, if we're doing doubles, I want it to get to where your like your RIR, your reps in reserve is essentially zero. Like, I don't want you to even be able to lift 3 reps of that weight. I want you to just get 2 clean, smooth reps, but like we're getting as close to our threshold as we can, and we're only doing it for maybe 3 or 4 sets. So total, we're only doing 8 to 12 reps maybe total of a lift. Like, I want every single rep that you're doing, whether that's 10 total reps, 12 total reps, I want every single rep to be at that strength threshold. And that's how just increase our strength ceiling. But to tie it back into this question, I mean, that's how we are increasing that bone density, and increasing our structural integrity. And we raise that ceiling, that makes everything else below it sub max. Yes, we definitely get after it with that kind of stuff, and it does a lot for your bone health overall, and your bone density and your longevity. But in order to get the most out of it, you got to lift at those intensities. You got to lift at the prescribed intensity that I'm giving you. And I think with a lot of wildland firefighters who just don't have a history in like lifting heavy weights, struggle to learn that. So that's a lot of our coaching, a lot of my coaching with individuals is helping people understand like what heavy lifting is actually supposed to mean and actually supposed to feel like, because it's supposed to feel really heavy. It's not supposed to feel good. But yeah, what do you got for this one?
I'm gonna try to keep it short because it could go on for an hour. I'm fascinated by bones. People don't see bones as tissues, and I think that's kind of the foundational problem with how you train for bone density, greater bone resilience and strength. It's similar to a muscle in the fact that it's going to respond to the demands placed on it. It's malleable. It's going to change drastically in response to the magnitude of force placed on it, the direction of the force placed on it, and the speed of that force being placed on it. So those magnitude and speed is what I'll get to right now. We need to increase the compressive loads on our bones to get them to adapt and respond and grow more cells. That's how bones adapt and become more strong. It gets that signal, you compress on it, but it has to be a high magnitude. Bones don't respond to low magnitudes like hypertrophy training, like bodybuilding. That's not the same as what Austin's talking about. Heavy doubles, heavy triples, pushing that max strength ceiling is where bones are going to adapt with the highest rate. They're also going to adapt to things like plyometrics, agility, change of direction, high impact loading. You aren't going to get the same response from the bone adaptation level if you're going slow. Jogging is not going to do it. Maybe if you're a beginner at jogging, because the relative level of impact is going to be greater than if you've never jogged, but sprinting, hammering it, that rate of force development is enough to consequently get that bone to adapt. That all happens in the shaft of the bone, the cortical part of the bone, the very ends of the bone, the spongy, the trabecular. Those are all directional. So when I think about wildland firefighting and how many awkward angles we have, how many different ways we can step, how many different ways force is distributed on us, we want to account for that too. So if we're going from perfect scenario, bones are just getting compressed and we're in the gym and there's no ecological facts to like what we're doing. There's no altered terrain. There's no steepness. There's no rocks. There's no side sloping. There's no boots on. I think of the specificity doesn't just stop with the magnitude. It's the direction as well. So when we get to the closer and closer parts of our season, starting to get our bones to see those different directions, take those altered force vectors, take things in different kinds of joint angles that maybe bend the bone, twist the bone, shear forces on the bone. It's not something I want to train for all off season because the bones they're great at handling stress up and down. They're not super great at handling forces in most other directions. But the simple fact is, in wildland firefighting, we don't live in a perfect scenario world, and we want to let those other top, bottom ends of the bone be able to handle those forces more efficiently. They distribute forces across the joint, and if your ends of the bone are only used to up and down forces, what's going to happen is as soon as they get a force side to side, it's not ready for it. So adding versatility to the training. The change of direction work is money. The working out on hills slowly but steadily increasing that demand, you're gradually creating the variety of vectors those can all go into, and then that bone's going to adapt in response to it. But that process needs to happen with recovery. That's where you don't want to go too fast, too strong, too heavy into any of these without the proper recovery and management of load. Bones, like everything else, can damage. Those micro traumas over and over and over without recovery can lead to things like stress fractures or acute injuries. So there's that one caveat to that introducing all of these things at once too fast. Do it with the
Yep.
proper load management. And if you don't know what that looks like, maybe ask a coach, hit us in the DMs. We can do a specific episode on load management and running volume, hiking volume, all that.
Yeah. Um, those points about speed and direction, I think, are massively underrated. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is a big reason why we do plyometrics. We talk a lot about, tendon health and the elasticity part of tissue, whether that's muscle or tendon, but that connective tissue with bones and ligaments sometimes doesn't get enough love as well. And so, yeah, if you're just doing body weight calisthenics and running and hiking, which is what Wildland Firefighter PT traditionally has been, you're leaving a lot on the table and you're not training a lot of these really important tissues um, in kind of a full capacity where if you're not doing those heavy strength lifts, you're not doing those plyometrics, you're just not building the resiliency in those tissues that you could be. So, I mean, that's where we've had a lot of success, introducing some of these styles of training in with our firefighters, in the off season, to build them up for, you know, a, a strong 8 to 12 week like preseason training block, and then obviously criticals, and then obviously fire season. So, man, this stuff is highly underrated, and that's kind of, I guess, to sum up this last question. I mean, that's kind of what our whole mission is with Rugged Athlete. It's to bring some of these training methods and these ideas and these things that are common, in other parts of strength and conditioning, but pretty rare and don't exist a whole lot here in the wildland population. So, man, that was good. I'm glad we got to knock out one of these Q&A sessions. We'll have to do a lot more of these. So if you're
I dig it.
listening, and yeah, if you're keep an eye out on the Instagram stories, like I mentioned before. If you got a question, make sure you pop it in there when we post on the stories, and we will answer it on the show.
No more questions about my hair, Ethan.